in the playoff picture and a free agent coming up after the season. So good timing.
Zoom and boom, everyone. Monday, November 25th, 2019. Hoping for no technical difficulties this week. It is the weekly sports grind. We are back at it. Exciting stuff. I really hope to get up last week's on here. I had tons of technical issues regarding that. So apologies in advance for that greatly. I tried everything, honestly. I tried everything I could to get last week's grind up. Unfortunately, could not do that. It was a rough week last week, but we are back at it this week. I'm going to try my darndest to also get ATSD up and streaming on Wednesday. I really am. I want to get back in the groove, although it's been a what the heck is that? I don't know what that is. My phone now is acting crazy. Even my phone wanted me to get back in it, let me tell you. But I'm going to try my hardest to get back in a rhythm and back in a groove. 3 topics lined up on deck for this week's grind, as normally the case is. I got 2 football-related ones and 1 hockey-related one to get going this week. So 2 for college football, because that's kind of the big thing right now. We have, of course, got NFL this past weekend. We had NFL tonight with Monday Night Football. But going to stick focusing on college because there's a lot going on with that, and 1 hockey topic that I also hope to get to. So let's start with college. Let's start with that. I do live in Big Ten country after all, and I pay attention to a lot of the Big Ten teams, and granted, my Big Ten teams this year are not doing so great. Purdue and Northwestern are struggling greatly at the bottom of the Big Ten standings. But that doesn't mean I don't pay attention to the other, teams across the league. And, very many good teams in the Big Ten this year. Very, very good. Of course, Ohio State, we know, leads the way. And I got to say, Ohio State, like this version of Ohio State, I think is a lot better than last year's version of Ohio State. Because I had to see last year's version of Ohio State in person at the Big Ten championship game. And, of course, I was definitely impressed with that version. But this version, on any side, find me a weakness. Like, literally, find me a weakness in this Ohio State team. I have yet to see it. I have yet to really take a look, and watching their games. I've been impressed every single time they've played. They're blowing people's doors off. They are top to bottom. They got Chase Young back this week, which was huge, although I found the timing of that very, very interesting. I will say that much. I found the timing of Chase Young's return very interesting. Because do you remember, when they first announced the suspension for Chase Young, it was originally they said it was going to be for 4 games, which would have been the rest of the season. Then they changed it to indefinite. And then they said, okay, we'll have him out the 2 games against Maryland and Rutgers, usually the bottom of the Big Ten anyway. And they blew their doors off. Oh, but we'll let him come back for the 2 games that matter to Ohio State, the 2 that are probably going to define whether or not they get into the playoff, which is Penn State and Michigan. We'll let him come back for those 2. I find that a little bit sketchy, but here's the thing. Chase Young did actually show a little bit of remorse. Like, yes, he admitted he was wrong in taking the loan from the family friend, so he at least admitted his wrongdoing. He did pay it back in full. So maybe in that regard, because normally, in this case, this would be a time of me slamming the NCAA, saying, oh, so inconsistent with penalties, as I've done many times before. But hold the phone on that. And normally, me, I'd go after I'd rip the NCAA a new one. I'd rip Ohio State a new one because I'm not a fan of either of them. But I think in this instance, I'm going to give Chase Young a little bit of the benefit of the doubt because of the fact that he, did admit he was wrong. He wasn't denying that he did it. He wasn't, hiding behind anybody or anything. He came out and said, yes, I did this. Yes, I paid it back. and I'm accepting of whatever punishment you give me. So at least in that regard, I get where, the timing then, okay, I guess sort of makes sense. Take the 2 games off and then put it to bed. So while sketchy as it may look on paper, I can sort of understand in that sense, why it happened. So, but for Ohio State, they're in the driver's seat. We know this. They're in the driver's seat. I will talk about the other teams when I talk about the rest of the playoff. I'm sticking to the Big Ten right now. Ohio State looks great. Penn State is a really good team this year. Minnesota. Michigan has played its best football of late, and there's going to be a ton of games, next week heading into Florida Championship week that are going to really define, what the Big Ten is going to look like, what the chances for the championship game and for the playoff are going forward. But Ohio State's in a pretty good spot. Minnesota is in a pretty decent spot. But here's the thing. And I mentioned this when I recorded last week's, and I didn't really get a chance to say it in this one. I honestly feel there's still some out there that are saying that Minnesota still has a shot at the playoff. I don't see it. I don't think that they do because they lost to a 3-loss football team. They lost to an Iowa team. Now, granted, I understand that Kinnick Stadium in Iowa is a very tough place to play. I understand that. It's really one of the underrated venues in the Big Ten. I mean, you think of your amazing Big Ten venues. You got, the Big House at Ohio or Michigan. You got the Horseshoe at Ohio State. You got Beaver Stadium at Penn State. When it's a whiteout, it's one of the toughest environments in all of college football. You think of those amazing Big Ten venues. Don't forget about Kinnick, because that place can also get really loud, especially during a primetime night game. Even so, I don't care when it is. Iowa is a tough place to play. It's a tough out for anybody. And so Minnesota goes in there, undefeated, hyped. They were still getting very disrespected by the committee, I feel, because they had just beaten Penn State the week prior, who at the time was number 4 in the CFP rankings. And so I thought that the committee would give Minnesota a lot more love. They didn't. And the same could have been said about, the team I call Bay Scum, because they get away with everything, also known as Baylor. And so, they were undefeated, and they weren't really high in the ranking either. And they were like number 10, and Minnesota only went up from like 17 to 8. Now, granted, that's a big jump, but I thought Minnesota at that point would be at least in the 5 or 6 range. I thought they'd be above Alabama, because Alabama had a loss. I thought they'd be above Oregon, who had 1 loss. So I thought they'd be at a lot higher spot. But really, I guess the committee didn't think, that highly of Minnesota or its schedule or something to that effect. So Minnesota goes to Iowa, and they lose to Iowa. And now, so while on the surface it might not seem like a bad loss, Iowa still has 3 losses. You're still losing to a 3-loss football team. And so I thought right then and there, I don't see any path, that Minnesota has too much in front of them to navigate. I don't think there's any path for them at this point to even think of making the playoff. I really don't see a path for Minnesota. Now, granted, this week's game against Wisconsin is huge because of the fact that, oh, by the way, not only is it one of the most longest running rivalry games in the history of college football, as a whole, with Minnesota, Wisconsin play for Paul Bunyan's Axe every as long as I can remember. I can look and see how long, but I know for a fact it's one of the longest running rivalries in all of college football. I'll check on this, but as far as they've played over, I think 100 times. Oh, come on. You cannot tell me this rivalry does not have its own Wikipedia page. You cannot tell me that. There we go. 128 meetings between these two teams. Now, the trophy started in 1948 with the axe. And actually, it wasn't always the axe. The first trophy was the slab of bacon, but that disappeared after the 43 game when the Badgers were supposed to turn it over to Minnesota. That probably explains why the Axe now is under such heavy security, or any trophy for that matter should be under heavy security. And interesting to note, the series is actually tied through 2018. 60, 60, and 8. That's amazing how even that they have been in this series. Now, Minnesota currently holds it now, but that broke a streak of 14 straight by Wisconsin. Normally, Wisconsin had owned this series, but Minnesota got it last year. And it wasn't even close either. It was 37-15. But you realize that in those 14 straight years that Wisconsin won, Wisconsin was ranked 8 of those times. Minnesota was only ranked 3 of those times. And now in this matchup, both of them are going to be ranked. So, or maybe not Wisconsin. I don't think Wisconsin's going to be in the playoff ranking. Yeah. So I think Minnesota will be probably heavily. Well, they might be. They'll put, and they've both been ranked. At least in that stretch, they were both ranked 3 times. So it doesn't happen often where they're both ranked, but it looks like it's going to happen here. So the key thing of it is this. Yeah, you're Minnesota, Wisconsin. This obviously is, I mean, it's a big game. It's a big game. Not only are you playing for the Axe, which is good, you're playing for also the Big Ten West division title. So the winner, really, if you think about it, gets 2 trophies in a sense, because, yeah, the winner of this game gets to represent the Big Ten West at Lucas Oil in Indianapolis on the big stage against Ohio State. I'm here to tell you, I don't care which one of them wins, whether it's Minnesota or Wisconsin, they are not beating this Ohio State team. It's not happening. I don't care what anybody says. It's not happening in this universe or any other universe. It's not happening. From what I have seen with this Ohio State team, again, it's find me a weakness. I have yet to see a 1 in Ohio State. Offensively, with Justin Fields under center and the talent they have there, I don't see, I don't see a fault. The defense, now that Chase Young is back, again, find me a fault. Special team, find me a fault. Find me a weakness. Hell, even find me a crack. I don't see a 1. And I understand that Minnesota is a really good team. They have a great quarterback, although I think Tanner Morgan, last I saw, is still in the concussion protocol, so they might not even have him for this game. So we got to keep our eyes on that. But their running game is great. I get it. They have talented receiving core. I get it. And Wisconsin, of course, is one of the best backs in the country. And Jonathan Taylor, who, oh, by the way, owns Purdue. No, Jonathan Taylor owns Purdue, okay? He bought the house. He put his stake in the yard. He signed the title. He owns Purdue, okay? The last 3 years, Jonathan Taylor has like over 700 yards and 5 touchdowns. Jonathan Taylor owns Purdue, okay? It's not even a debate at this point. He owns them. But, yeah, Wisconsin, of course, running back central. The quarterback play is always solid. Wisconsin is known for its defense. That's all well and good. The gap is insanely wide, and I saw it firsthand last year. You know why? Because I went to the Big Ten Championship last year. Because I got the honor, I guess, the privilege of seeing it thanks to my amazing mother, and she also got me more tickets for this year's game as well. I got 3 tickets last year. I got 2 for this year's game. So I've seen Ohio State firsthand, and I've seen how good they are. And the whole thing, I never understood the fear, like when Urban Meyer retired, and I never understood everyone's fear. Oh no, Urban's not coaching anymore. Oh, Ohio State's gonna fall into the abyss. This is Michigan's year. I never thought that. You know why? Because Urban Meyer had a plan. Because he had a succession plan in place for Ryan Day. He knew that he was putting the program in the right hands. He knew that the program was going to be fine with him. And look, Ohio State is still at the top of the mountain. They're still. Remember the game you played in school called King of the Mountain? When everyone was, you try to the top and everyone tried to knock you off, everyone's trying to knock Ohio State off the mountain, and they can't do it. They can't do it, folks. They can't do it. Find me a team that can do it. I mean, I'm waiting. It's like, I'm waiting for somebody to knock them off the mountain. Because right now, I don't know until they get to the playoff. I don't see anybody in the Big Ten beating this team. I really don't. So so in my eyes, the reality of it is, Minnesota, Wisconsin, you're playing for 2 trophies this week. You're playing, Wisconsin's trying to get the axe back, and Minnesota wants to retain it. And the winner gets to go to Indianapolis and represent the Big Ten West and be a part of that atmosphere and that excitement, and have the fans come and make that trip. That's awesome. I mean, of course, getting to any conference championship should never be taken lightly. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying it's not important to not play for a conference championship, make a conference championship, and what have you. It's a great accomplishment. I mean, heck, Northwestern last year. I mean, you understand Northwestern. Northwestern is like the smallest school in the Big Ten. They're a private university. Great. Yeah, they're on the outskirts of Chicago. Okay, so they're near a big city. But Northwestern doesn't get a whole lot of attention for its athletics. You understand that, right? Northwestern is the brain. We're the brainy A+ students. We have the great GPA. We're known for our academic classes. That's what Northwestern is known for. For them to make the Big Ten championship game last year, that was a big deal for Northwestern. That was insane for them. And they sold out their ticket allotment rather quickly. I was surprised actually that they sold out their they sold it out so quickly. It's like their own student body. I read the numbers. They were bringing almost 5,000 people. It was full. They had a little bit of a block in the Lucas Oil section, and we could see it from where we were sitting. But it was a big deal to Northwestern. So I'm not saying that getting to a conference championship is not a big deal. I'm not saying that. But when the odds are truly stacked against you, you have to hope for a Hunger Games, Katniss Everdeen-like miracle if you're going to beat this Ohio State team. Seriously. So Minnesota, Wisconsin, I know you're going to have a great game this week, and I know it's going to be a battle, as it always is, as it should be, because not only of the rivalry that it is, but the stakes that are at hand. But then I forewarn you what's to come next week. Then, whoever wins that game has to take their 2 pieces of hardware, and then you run right into the grinder, if you will. Not a pun on the show, but you literally run into the grind that is Ohio State. It is just this this giant pencil sharpener just winding up, ready to take you on. That image just popped into my head of just Ohio State, we're waiting for you, because that's what Ohio State is. Ohio State is cockiness. Ohio State is swagger. Ohio State is, hey, world, look at us. We're the best. Dun, 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 walking in, strolling, all riding in. We're bad, and we know it. Take us on. We're going to, we have to, keep winning time and again to show you how bad we are. That's just the Ohio State way. It's kind of like the Patriot way. It's kind of the same concept. Everyone has a way. You hear that in sports all the time. It's the Patriot way. It's the Butler way. Well, the Ohio State way is we walk in with swag and we know we're better than you, and we're going to prove it today. That's always been the way ever since the days of Jim Tressel, or even you go further back to Woody Hayes. It's been the Ohio State way. There's an Ohio State swagger about them, and they are there to show that they own you, that they can dominate you in every aspect of the game, and they're going to do it. And you can look at numbers and statistics, and the matchup looks close on paper. And on the field, where it actually matters, it's Ohio State. What else do I have to say? It's Ohio fucking State. So yeah, Minnesota and Wisconsin, you're going to be on this big stage, in this game that, yeah, it does matter because it's not only a rivalry game, but because you're playing for a division title. And yes, that matters, and that does matter. That you're going to get a chance to play on the big stage. But when the lights come on and the moment's there, and after all the hype that builds up, what's the more likely thing to happen? What is more likely to happen? Ohio State's been here before. They know what this is all about. Now, if it's Minnesota, I don't think has ever been to the Big Ten championship. I'm pretty sure that they haven't. I can look up previous Big Ten championships, and I don't think Minnesota has ever gotten there. So what I worry about for Minnesota is if the stage is going to be too big for them. That's what I worry about. Let's see. Because I can't remember a time when Minnesota ever made it. Results. Here we go. Yeah, Minnesota has never been. Not one time. Now, Wisconsin has been there 5 times. Guess what? Wisconsin has lost every single time. Wisconsin is 0-5 lifetime in the Big Ten championship. Or no, I'm sorry. That's okay. They're not doing it by Legends leader. Okay, they put out Wikipedia confused me here. It looks like that they were 0-5 because I thought it was going to be win or loser, but no, they changed it up. Okay, so actually I take that back. They've won it twice. It confused the heck out of me because the way that they did these columns. Okay. I know on a tangent, but pro tip Wikipedia. When you do your columns and you're doing a sports thing, put winner on the left and loser on the right. Like seriously, don't do this column stuff where you're confusing the heck out of somebody like me. Don't do that. That's confusing as all get out. Now, they have lost the last 3 Big Ten title appearances in Wisconsin. Now, they won 2, but that was back in 2011 and 2012. In 2011, they barely beat Michigan State 42-39. In 2012, they beat Nebraska 70-31. And that was kind of a surprise because Nebraska was ranked 14th and Wisconsin wasn't ranked. But look at Wisconsin in the last 3 appearances. 2014. Oh, that was the year that Ohio State had to win to have any chance to get in the playoff, and they blew Wisconsin's doors off 59-0. Guess what? They got into the playoff, and oh, by the way, they went on to win the national title that year. 2016, lost to Penn State 38-31. Wisconsin, by the way, in that game was the higher-ranked team. 2017, Ohio State beat them 27-21. Again, Wisconsin that year was the higher-ranked team. Ohio State in 2 Big Ten championship games has owned Wisconsin, has owned them. Ohio State has won 3 Big Ten titles. Ohio State, aside from one year where they lost to Michigan State in 2013, 34-24, Ohio State, usually when they're in the Big Ten championship, you can book it, done. They will win the championship game. What is more likely to happen? Now, I understand that chaos can happen. I get it. I get that chaos can happen. I understand that completely. I get it. But what is the more likely scenario to happen? The more likely scenario is that Ohio State is going to take care of business against Michigan because Ohio State, by the way, also owns Michigan. You realize the last 15 years, Ohio State has won 14 out of 15 against Michigan. Michigan's only beaten them one time. One time. Ohio State owns the Big Ten. They own Michigan. They own the championship game. They've won the title the last 2 years. What else is there to talk about here? What else is there to debate? And stop telling me that Minnesota has a chance to get into the playoff if they win. I don't see it. I don't see it. And certainly Wisconsin wouldn't, because Wisconsin has what? Has 2 losses? It's not going to happen. I don't see it happening. I really don't. I will say this. I would prefer that it would be Wisconsin playing Ohio State because Wisconsin has been there before. I would prefer that because Wisconsin has the experience of being in this championship game multiple times. I fear that Minnesota would kind of have the deer in the headlights look because they've never been on that stage before. I don't, and I know, I know the pundits sometimes say different things, but to me, experience is a factor. Experience matters to some degree. Experience has to play for something or stand for something in this regard. And I think it matters here a lot. So Minnesota, Wisconsin. I know we're going to get a great game for you this week. It's a rivalry. There's hype. I get it. You're playing for not only your rivalry hardware, but a division title hardware. And that's all well and good. And it's great. They're going to get to be on that big stage. But when the lights come on and the ball's kicked off, what are we going to expect? It's Ohio State. They know how to play on the big stage. The results don't lie. They know how to win these titles. They know how to play in these games. They've been doing it all season. They own the Big Ten right now. Why should I think any differently? Why should I see it any differently until I see a team that can actually knock off Ohio State and show me some kind of weakness in Ohio State? Why would I think for any second that Wisconsin or certainly Minnesota has a chance in hay of beating them? I don't see it. And honestly, as I traverse over now in the topic number 2, I don't really see, again, I've said this throughout this whole process, once the committee started selecting the top 4 teams for the playoff, unless we really have some wild semblance of chaos, the top 4 in the rankings are not going to change. Your CFP 4 is pretty much going to be set unless some totally off the wall scenarios happens over this next week or two, with the final week of the regular season and then with conference championship week. Unless some crazy insanity happens, your top 4 are going to be LSU, Ohio State, Clemson, and Georgia. It's simple as that. Now, Clemson and Georgia are not flashy, okay? They're not. But Clemson's not getting left out. They're undefeated, as unfortunate as it is, even though they've played nobody, and I've emphasized that time and again, even though Clemson has not played anybody very strong. Again, their best wins are Texas A&M and North Carolina, and maybe Wake Forest, but Wake Forest fell off the map of late. Yay, good for you. Here's a cookie. I mean, what do you, again, I've said it and I'll say it. The only reason they're up there is because they're Clemson and they won the title last year. That's the only, boy, I'm popular tonight. That's the only reason why Clemson is in that spot. But, and same with, and now Georgia. The only reason Georgia's there is because Georgia is winning games with defense. Georgia is not flashy. Georgia's not like LSU. LSU is very flashy offensively because they have a great quarterback in Joe Burrow. Not to say that Jake Fromm's not good. He is. He's just not elite. He's not going to be a Heisman finalist. He's not like Joe Burrow putting up these ridiculous arcade-like stats. Same with Tua before he went down. He's not going to put up those flashy numbers. But Georgia gets the job done with their defense. They do enough on offense to win games, mind you. But by the same token, they're winning games with defense because they're shutting out opponents. They're holding them in check. They've shut out Kentucky. They shut out Missouri, and a very game Missouri team, mind you. And they kept Auburn in check. And, oh, by the way, a same Auburn team that, beat Oregon. And now Oregon, of course, is out of the mix because Oregon just got beat by Arizona State. Isn't it just crazy how the Pac-12 is essentially killing its own chances. Like the Pac-12 is essentially just sabotaging itself because, quite frankly, they love just beating up on each other. Arizona State had not played very well in a month, and they were losing close games. They weren't coming through in the clutch. Now, I admire the job that Herm Edwards has done at Arizona State. I like the Sun Devils, and I admire the job that Herm Edwards has done there. I appreciate that greatly. He's got a freshman quarterback that doesn't play like a freshman in Jalen Edwards, and the running back, Benjamin, and then Ayuk, one of their big time receivers and playmakers on the kickoffs. They have playmakers and they have the talent. But the last month, they were not winning these close games. They were losing these close games. But they found a way. They found a way against Oregon to put it all together. And in that environment at home, they got the job done. Arizona State, Tempe is a tough place to play too. You want to talk about a tough place to play in the Pac-12? There are several. Oregon certainly is at the top of the list. Austin Stadium's always been a tough place to play. But there's just something about the Pac-12 and those home venues, Oregon, Arizona State, Colorado, and that altitude in Boulder, tough environments to play. You might throw Washington in there or Utah, And speaking of Utah, now with Oregon's loss, the Utes now are in a position and more than likely when the rankings are revealed tomorrow night, they'll probably be in that top 6. They'll probably be in that 6th spot. Now, they'll still be below Alabama because, Alabama, it was Mac Jones's coming out party. Western Carolina, ooh, scary. It was his coming out party. We knew that they were going to blow the doors off Western Carolina because Western Carolina is an FCS school. We knew. 66-3. We kind of knew. Now, so Utah is not going to leapfrog Alabama by any stretch. Even though the win over Arizona was impressive, they're not going to pass Alabama. The top 4 is not going to change because it was straightforward. Everybody won this weekend, so there was no chaos at the top aside from Oregon losing. So the top of it is not really going to change. But again, unless there's just unmitigated chaos, the top 4 is not going to change. The teams below the top 4 are going to need some serious help. So then it's like you play the what-if game. Well, what if Alabama just blows the doors off Auburn? Alabama, if Alabama has any chance to get in the playoff, they have to blow out Auburn by a lot. It has to be at least 20-plus. It cannot be a close game. For Alabama to have any chance to get in, they cannot play Auburn close. And I know that game is usually close because, again, it's a rivalry game. It's the Iron Bowl. There's a lot of hype building up to that. And usually it comes down to a play or two. For Alabama to have any chance to get in the playoff, it cannot be a close game. They have to assert their will. If they want to make a statement, as I said, I think a couple weeks ago, it's a statement game for Alabama. They have to exert their will. They have to show why they think they deserve a spot over Georgia. Now, let's say, obviously, any loss by Georgia. Georgia's, of course, in the most precarious spot because that 4 spot, you lose and you're sitting in that 4 spot, especially if you already have a loss, and that loss is to a South Carolina team that is not going to a bowl game. Georgia is in a precarious seat here. Okay, Georgia's seat at number 4 is very, very, I wouldn't say hot, but at least mild. Let's put it that way. It's very warm, to say the least. Not quite hot, but very, very warm. Don't get comfortable, Georgia. Because if Georgia loses to LSU in the SEC championship game, they're out. Guaranteed, they're out. They're not going to take a 2-loss team, especially not if Alabama, beats Auburn. Because if Alabama beats Auburn, I think in any capacity, and Georgia loses, Alabama's in. To make a statement to the committee, Alabama would have to, blow the doors off. But that's only if Alabama would have to hope that Georgia loses to LSU in the SEC championship game. They would have to. They'd have to hope for that for sure. And because, again, they're not taking a 2-loss team. But what if then Alabama does blow Auburn's doors off, but Georgia beats LSU in the title game. So we know then Georgia would be in for sure. But then the question becomes, okay, how far does LSU fall? And depending on what happens with Ohio State and Clemson, of course, then where does LSU then compare against Alabama? I still think then Alabama would still be out. But again, if Alabama beats Auburn close, they'd still be out, I think. I think LSU would still get it over them because of the fact that LSU beat Alabama, and that was with a mostly healthy Tua. But let's say Alabama beats Auburn by a lot, probably, again, by that 20, 30-point margin, or have you, and Georgia blows LSU's doors off. Then it becomes interesting. Then I think it becomes interesting. Yeah, of course, you want to factor in that LSU-Alabama head-to-head. That's fine. But then it really becomes a hot debate of, because you got to look at everything. You can't just look at, one game or two or what have you. You got to look at everything. So then that debate really gets interesting. Talking about more chaos. Because a lot of teams below these four need help. We know this. Utah needs help, or Alabama needs help, Utah needs help. And by the way, let's not forget about the Big 12 winner. The Big 12 winner with whether it be Oklahoma or Basecom, they would need some serious help. Whoever wins that game obviously would still be in the hunt. But then they would need some serious help from the teams up top. What if Ohio State does stumble along the way? What if Ohio State loses to Michigan? They're already booked into the Big Ten championship. So as long as Ohio State still wins the Big Ten championship, even if they lose to Michigan along the way, I still think Ohio State would get in because again, Ohio State has been at this top spot for most of the year. So I think even if Ohio State's sitting in a pretty good spot. Ohio State even could certainly make a case to be number one because by the way, LSU didn't really beat anybody spectacular this week, while Ohio State beat. By the way, they beat. Then they beat Penn State. They beat Penn State. So Ohio State really this week, if you think about it, has the better win. But I don't think the committee is going to just base it again off of one game. So certainly Ohio State could have a case to jump to LSU to number one, but I don't see that happening because everybody won. So I don't see that happening. But you got to admit, Ohio State's still sitting in a pretty good spot. Even if they lose to Michigan, as long as Ohio State wins the Big Ten championship, they're going to get in. What if and again, I'm not thinking this is going to happen, but you got to play the what if game and think of all the scenarios. What if by some crazy circumstance, Ohio State stays unbeaten in the Big Ten championship game and somehow has a day off and loses to Minnesota or Wisconsin? What if that happens? Well, then now it'd be worse for Ohio State. Now, if it's Minnesota also has one loss. So if it's Minnesota, it might not be as bad. The committee might not view that as bad. Again, it would hinge on if Clemson runs the table, because Clemson would probably move up to 2. It would depend on what Georgia and Alabama do, and it would hinge on what Utah does. Or the Big 12 champ, what have you. It would hinge on a lot of those factors. So if it's Minnesota, I don't think it would cost Ohio State as much. They would either barely get in or barely be left out. If it's Wisconsin, I think Ohio State would fall out because that would be a worse loss in the committee's eyes. I think they'd really have to factor that in. So with Ohio State, there's, again, barring any other surprises, Ohio State's in a really good spot. Clemson, I think, also is in a really good spot. With the soft schedule they're playing, they should take care of business against South Carolina this week, and then they'll play a 3-loss, potentially 4-loss team in the ACC championship game, whether it be Virginia or Virginia Tech, and they'll probably win that game easily because they're not going to be ranked. And but now if Clemson loses that game, I think Clemson's out. Clemson is the team in this scenario that cannot really afford a loss because, again, of the Cupcake Central schedule that Clemson has played, they cannot afford a loss in any sense. I think if Clemson loses anywhere along the path, whether it be a South Carolina or in the ACC championship, Clemson's out. The only way I can see the teams below the top 4 getting in, Alabama has to, either blow Auburn's doors off, make a statement, and then hope that Georgia beats, either Georgia loses convincingly to LSU, or that Georgia then beats LSU by enough for the committee to somehow validate putting Alabama in over LSU. That'd really be Alabama's only hope. Utah, of course, has to win the Pac-12. They have to win out, beat Oregon in the Pac-12 title game, and then they have to hope again that there's chaos in the 4. If Ohio State has a loss or Clemson has a loss along the way, or again someone stumbles out that 4 spot enough where Utah could potentially move up, or if Utah blows Oregon's doors off, again not likely, but let's say they do, then again they'd have to have chaos among the lower half of those seeds to have any chance of sneaking in to the top 4. As for whoever wins the Big 12, it's a long shot. Obviously, that's the longest shot for whether it be Oklahoma or Baylor. It's going to be it's the longest shot. They would have to complete insanity. Like Ohio State would have to lose in the Big Ten title game, probably convincingly. Clemson would have to lose once or twice along the way. Georgia would have to lose greatly in the SEC championship to LSU. Bama would have to probably lose to Auburn, or by a convincing margin. Utah would have to not win the Pac-12. Like that's really the only ways that the winner of the Big 12 somehow finds its way into the playoff. My gosh, I'm popular. So that's really the only ways that I can see that the Big 12 champ gets in. There would just have to be a complete and utter semblance of just chaos explosion for any way for one of those teams to get into the playoff. So they would have to win out and get some serious help. So I really don't expect much change in the rankings tomorrow night. I think it's still going to be LSU 1, Ohio State 2, Clemson 3, Georgia will be 4, Bama will be 5, and Utah will be 6. I think that's how it's going to shape up. The interesting thing is going to be, where does the committee, how far does Oregon drop? They're probably going to drop pretty far because they lost to an unranked team. And then how far does everyone else move up as a result? Where is Penn State going to be? Where's Minnesota going to be? Where's Michigan going to be after they blew Indiana out? Where are these other teams going to be in relation in that middle tier below the top 6? Where's Oklahoma going to be? Is Oklahoma going to be in 7? Where's Baylor going to be at? So where the committee puts those teams that are quote unquote in the hunt is going to be really critical to see what chances they have going forward to try and crash the party. So it's always interesting to see how that plays out these final 2 weeks of the season. It's going to be exciting. I know it is, but I don't expect too much change in the rankings tomorrow because mostly this past week for those top teams, it was very status quo with the exception of Oregon losing to Arizona State. So that is where we sit on that. So yeah, I don't think there's going to be, unless chaos happens, those 4 teams are going to be set. But as we know in football, anything can happen. Anything can happen anytime. So we shall see how it plays out. All right, one story left I want to talk about. One, and maybe not, I won't go into too much detail on this one, but I want to talk about it a little bit because I don't want to focus all on football. I want to talk a little bit about hockey a bit. I love hockey. I'm a much diehard hockey fan as I am football or basketball. I've loved hockey for years, and as you know, I'm always passionate about my teams. And last year, with the Tampa Bay Lightning, last year it was what a fun team to watch. I mean, it was a fun team to watch in the regular season. With the talent they had and the rosters put together, and Vasilevsky in net, and just the success the team had. 61 wins. It was so much fun to watch that team last year. And I thought, honestly, and I think we all thought that they were going to make a deep run in the postseason. And then the playoffs happened, and Columbus happened, and the sweep, and the most unceremonious exits in all of playoff sports. I mean, it was painful. It was painful to see that team get swept the way they did. And this year, and so I'm thinking, in the offseason that the Lightning are going to make some changes. Now, granted, being a team that good, you're going to have the salary cap. You're going to have some issues with that. So you're going to lose a lot of, your quality talent. And that's exactly what happened with the Lightning. They lost a couple really good players in Ryan Callahan and Anton Strawman and Adam Ernie and, a couple really good players as a result of the salary cap and free agency. So I knew that it was going to be, a lot of talent to replace. It'd be very, very difficult, especially if they didn't make an effort to, get some, re-sign some players in the off season. They didn't do much with that. They didn't, and it frustrated me. In fact, the day of, excuse me, the first day of free agency, I'll never forget it. I see who the Lightning all signed, and I count up, and I'm like, wait, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. What the heck are we doing signing 4 goaltenders? 4 goaltenders. And we have Vasilevsky already. You signed 4 goalies. Why? It made absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. You're trying to replace talent that you lost, and instead you're hoping that you have solid depth behind your Vezina Trophy winning goaltender. Okay. Yeah, how's that going to pan out? Well, how it's panned out this season is not a good start for the Lightning. I think right now, last I checked, they're 11-8-2. They're 6th or 7th in the division. They're obviously behind Boston, which I expected. I expected Boston to be kind of competitive in this division. I expected Toronto and maybe Buffalo, but Buffalo's hit the skids of late. Montreal is ahead of them. Okay, that's it. Florida. The Lightning aren't even the best team in the state of Florida. The Panthers are ahead of them. Not even the best team in your own state of Florida. How do you explain that? And I get now why Stevie Y left. I get now why he left. He, and got promoted in Detroit. He wanted to go back home. Detroit is his thing. He wanted to go back to Detroit. Now, granted, Detroit, that's a rebuilding project. And Detroit's at the bottom of the league, and I get that. But that's a rebuilding project. But that's Stevie. I guess that's still more Stevie Y's thing. Because, he was with a good team. But even when they get painfully swept, and then I guess that gives you a good reason as any to go back home to Detroit. The Lightning just right now are just very, very frustrating to me. Who do you blame? Who do you blame for this slow start? Do you blame the GM, the new GM Brisbois, who made all these stupid moves? Do you blame him? Do you blame John Cooper? Many are calling for John Cooper to be canned. I don't know if we take it that far, but I wouldn't be surprised either because Coop is not exactly the best at making readjustments. Cooper is very much a by-the-book head coach. He tries to do things very straightforward. He's his way is his way. And this is how we're going to do it, and this is how we're going to attack, and this, that, and the other. We're going to get conservative this time, yada, 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 and what have you. And he doesn't know how to make adjustments, or he won't, or he'll refuse to make adjustments because teams are better preparing for him and how to play the Lightning. They saw it last year. So, it would not surprise me if he gets taken the fall. I mean, I don't know where else to go, but I will say one thing. Hockey fans are superstitious, right? Pretty superstitious. Like, there's a lot of superstitions that happen in hockey. Players have their routines. They have certain things they do before games or a warm-up, technique or tactic or what have you. Or fans do certain things, for games when they go to games. Superstitions. Nothing, no harm in them. They're harmless. Superstitious. No. I've said it. I've tweeted about it. I've said this very often. And I don't know. I can't believe I'm going to this length, but it's like it kind of needs to be done. Like the black jerseys that the Lightning wear, those disrupt the night things that uniform set they wear is hideous. And when the team lately, before the game last time against the Ducks, when they beat them 6-2, they had not had much success wearing those black jerseys. Like they were not winning in them. I have told the team, I've kind of tweeted the team time and time again to get rid of those abominations. Like they're terrible. I don't like them. They don't look good in them. I hate the kind of the drippy dots down the side. I hate it. I hate the look. I can't stand them. I think they're just hideous. Am I saying that they're to blame for the slow start? No, but every time it's like nearly every time I watch them play in them, they lose. You gotta blame something or somebody. Like you gotta point the finger somewhere. If it's not the GM, if it's not the coach, you take the superstitious route. And I know that might sound a little bit crazy, a little bit cuckoo, but I don't know where else to go. I mean, I don't know what else to think, in regards to that. They need to go, and maybe it'll shake things up. Come with a better third uniform design. Gosh, the Lightning have had some great third uniform designs over the years. They've had some really good ones that I really liked. Bring those back. Bring out the nostalgia. A lot of teams are going for their throwbacks. I think the Vancouver Canucks, when they wore their throwbacks a few days ago, didn't they win? Of course, the Canucks have been crushing it this year, but the throwback stuff has kind of worked lately. Maybe dip into that a bit for some inspiration, something different, something new to try, But you gotta get back in it, and they have played better of late, and I will give the Lightning credit for that because the biggest bugaboo with the Lightning this year is they haven't played a full game. Like there are times when they are aggressive, and there are times when they're conservative, and sometimes when they're too conservative, they let teams just steamroll them, or Vasily will give up a soft goal or two, and then it becomes a snowball. A snowball becomes an avalanche, if you will. And it becomes a problem, and they've noticed it during the broadcast. The people calling in have noticed it. Fans have noticed it. The Lightning blogs have noticed it. I have noticed it. We all notice it, and it becomes. And you don't want something tiny that's noticeable to be into something really, really big and huge. You don't want it to snowball into something that can't be fixed. So I hope that the Lightning can put this together and all that, and they probably won't get rid of those jerseys. They probably won't because they think they like them and they think they sell and they're popular and what have you. But it won't change my opinion on them. It won't. My gosh, why am I so popular? So many notifications tonight. I don't know why, but you get where I'm going with this. They're going to keep pushing those out, and they're going to try, their hardest. They need more consistency. They need more consistency, and if consistency doesn't happen, then a change has to happen somewhere. They didn't do enough in the offseason to address what they lost. So I knew that Tampa was going to fade a little bit. I didn't think they would fade this much. Like I didn't think that they would fall back this hard. I'm surprised by their fading back. I'm surprised that Nashville has faded back this much. And actually, there was a rumor started by somebody on Twitter that actually had a Nashville Predators in their Twitter handle, and they tweeted that they were going to fire head coach Peter Laviolette and one of the assistants. I did a little research on it later, and that turned out to be false. But people need to be careful what they read on Twitter and the internet. But I was surprised. So yeah, I was surprised by Nashville fading out. I'm not surprised by the Sharks. Like San Jose, I'm not surprised by the Sharks because, again, they lost a lot in the offseason. They didn't do much in the offseason to get all of that back. So I knew that the Sharks were going to struggle at first, and they have played better of late, especially since they got Patrick Marleau back, which I didn't even know happened until they mentioned on TV one day, and I'm like, when did he come back? I didn't even know that had happened. So I was stunned with that as anything. But they're playing better of late. I know the Avalanche have regressed a bit of late because of injuries. So they've fallen back a bit, but they start out the year strong. Let's see what else. Ducks have been up and down, but that's always the Ducks. Now the Penguins have played really well. I'd say of my teams right now that I follow, I'd say the Avalanche or the Penguins are doing the best because they've been consistently scoring goals, being an offensive juggernaut, doing well in net. They're up at the top, toward the top of their divisions. They're doing really well. They're doing nice things. So I think they've impressed me the most. But in terms of the Lightning, if they're gonna be a contender and they're gonna compete, then they have to find some consistency, be more aggressive on offense, do better on the penalty kill. My gosh, their penalty kill is one of the worst in the league. They're giving up power play goals like free candy. They need to be better on the penalty kill and turnovers. They can't keep having these quick turnovers, whether it be in their own zone or not. They need to do a better job in that regard too. So, and who knows? Maybe I'll get my wish. Maybe they'll finally realize those jerseys aren't the best, and they'll switch it up, and we'll get a throwback. Maybe. It's wishful thinking at this point, but guy can dream, can he? Guy can dream. All right. Well, Monday Night Countdown is going to be coming up here shortly. So it's been about an hour, which is kind of how I want this format to go. So couldn't be more perfect timing. So we're going to wrap things up here on the grind for this week. So again, thank you so much for your support, your patience, your understanding. Any views that are given, I do appreciate that. And again, apologies again last week for the technical issues for all that. I'm trying to iron these out as best I can. It's not easy by any stretch, but I'm powering through. I'm powering through the best I can. And also here's hoping that nothing will also disrupt the ATSD stream on Wednesday, because again, that's going to be another pony-centered one. Soapboxes, character rankings, top 10 songs, a couple other stories. I'll share my thoughts, of course, on quote-unquote Gen 4.5. It's going to be coming up next year as well. So we'll definitely share my thoughts on that as well on Wednesday. Now, the weather, I hope, will cooperate to some degree, because they just issued a high wind watch for my area on Wednesday for like the whole day, like 7 a.m. 7 p.m., like the whole day. So keep your fingers and hooves crossed that the power doesn't go out during the stream. That'd be a very bad thing. So that will be on Wednesday. It'll probably be in the afternoon. I'll probably shoot for around 2 p.m. Eastern time, like I normally would for an ATSD stream. If that changes, I will post to Twitter. I will definitely post on the discussion on the channel as well to let you all know that is changing up. So, as always, thank you so much for the support, for the views. It means the world. Thank you so much for all that. And I will see you all on Wednesday for According to Spiky Dash, episode 39. Another pony-centered episode, which I never thought that I'd have again. But apparently there's still a lot to talk about, even though Gen 4 has been over for 44 days. Yeah, and I know this because I keep track in the journal. Every time I have something to think about that I write in here. And I had an entry today about the Twitter ponies. 44 days without Gen 4. Holy cow. And I'm still surviving. unbelievable. So thank you as always. See you Wednesday afternoon on the next stream for ATSC. God bless and have a great rest of your night.